for that, but let's begin with this fallout from both Ferguson and the Garner case. Matthew Dowd, it was striking to me to hear John Kasich just there talk about the chances of working across party lines here. Is this a bipartisan moment for action?
I believe it's a bipartisan moment for action, but it's been thrown into a partisan mix of all this. I think what's incredibly disturbing and troubling about all this is I think, obviously, there's racism in America, and no human being deserves to die. I don't even care what you did, what your criminal action was. No human being deserves to die. The problem, I think, in the cauldron that we have, where there's been a breakdown in almost every institution, now there's questions on all sides about the justice system in America. And when we now question the results of a law enforcement and justice system in America, we're at a very, very troubling point. And I think at some point, and I think you're right, we have to figure out a way to come together on this, because if now all sides doubt the actions of a law enforcement or justice system in the country, I don't know what we do.
And one of the things that complicates all this, Van Jones, is that you see this real concern that's expressed in the streets, expressed across the country, but it's against the backdrop, of at least the statistics I've seen, of misconduct by police.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You got a couple things. First of all, I think there's been a false choice here. You hear a lot of people saying, well, what do you want? No policing? I think, African Americans need to be heard here. We're saying we want better policing. We want effective policing. We shouldn't be tossed in between street crime and street violence or police violence. And so I think we've been talking past each other a lot on some of these topics. I was very proud to hear de Blasio sticking to his guns. I have 2 African-American boys. We have had that conversation with them, and they're 10, okay? So 10 and 6. We've had that conversation. We are concerned that there's such a stereotype now that the police have of young men of color that it results in violence against them. And let's not forget.
But do the statistics overall really back that up?
Well, first of all, you got 95% of African-Americans who are not involved at all as victims or as criminals. 95% of us are just law-abiding, and yet there is this view. Not going to make any progress.
I think obviously we should support any measures that increase accountability and transparency consistent with public safety. But I think also we have to maintain some perspective here. New York City police, just to look at New York, to say that arrest was a product of centuries of racism. Look at American history. Chattel slavery, Jim Crow, the arrest of Eric Garner. One of these things is not like the others.
Look, we're talking past each other. And this is exactly the point that I think we've got to get past now. If we're going to have a real conversation, some people are now saying, well, listen, because that one officer, we're missing each other. We're talking about a much bigger set of statistics that show African Americans, for instance, just on drug use alone, 14% of African Americans use drugs. 37% of the drug arrests are black. That's the problem we're talking about, and that is racial.
Congresswoman in here. Is Congress ready to step in here? You saw the president at the beginning of the week say, need more money for body cameras, need to focus on training.
Well, first of all, remember that this is an individual case, and individual cases must be based on fact. And where we run into the problem is when we get to see we get this into the general overall issue of what's happening here, and emotions fly, and facts are no longer important to what is going on there, because it is really hitting us. But let's remember, one of the exciting things is that this is crossing racial lines, this is crossing demographics, this is not a south-north thing or an east coast-west coast thing. People are saying we need to make changes. And how do we do
it down, and then all of a sudden we all spike off of the race gauntlet, and whether or not it is. Let's say it comes back in these instances and they say it wasn't about race. Oh, we wipe our hands together, everything's fine. Well, it's not. In my view, this raises 2 huge questions in it. Just first is the militarization of the police force in this country. And we basically dress up officers now as if they're machines.
All flowed out of 9/11,
this is my problem with the camera. We're going to put more equipment, bigger guns, bigger machines and all that, and then we expect them to act like human beings. We dress them up like a machine, and so what happens is they confuse power with force. Most of the officers in this country do a great job, but when we militarize the police force and treat them like machines, but we act like machines.
We have to admit that is one way where Congress can fix that. We have to look at that outcome from 9/11 of militarizing our police officers and maybe pull back from that. And maybe we do use new technology. Maybe we put the money in for new technology. I'm not saying that's the solution, but we have to have accountability and hold those accountable when the facts say yes and prosecute, and we have to pull back on that militarization.
We should have a certain modesty, though, because all these reforms may be worthy. Maybe the federal government shouldn't be giving so much, armored cars and other material to the police. But that had nothing to do with the incident in Ferguson. It would have nothing to do with the arrest of Eric Garner. And you have to be very careful with the statistics.
I do want to talk about one reform that I think everybody can agree with. We need to have special prosecutors in these places. It is not fair to expect police and prosecutors to police themselves. It is not anti-cop to say that. It's not anti-cop. It's not anti-butcher to say you want to have meat inspectors. It's not anti-construction worker to say you want building inspectors. No human system, if it doesn't have adequate checks and balances and oversight, will avoid being subject to corruption.
The problem with that, it's going to be thrown into this, and it's automatically going to be doubted and mistrusted and all. There's mistrust.
We asked for a special prosecutor. If we had a special prosecutor in Ferguson, we would not have had the outcome that we had.
We got to take a break right now. I'm not positive about that, though. More Roundtable coming up. We'll take a look at all the consequences of these plunging oil and gas prices. That great news for consumers in the holiday spirit displayed there by President Obama, and it inspires our powerhouse puzzle. So here goes, guys. What will the average American spend on Christmas gifts this year? We'll be right back with the answer.
Do you and Mom still have money with that broker?
Yeah, 20-something years now. Thinking about what you want to do with your money?
Looking at options. What are you guys paying fees?
I don't know exactly.
So you're not happy that they have to pay you back?
It doesn't really work that way.
You sure?
Are you asking enough questions about the way your wealth is managed? Wealth Management at Charles Schwab.
I take Prilosec OTC each morning for my frequent heartburn. Because you can't lose zero heartburn.
Prilosec OTC, the #1 doctor-recommended frequent heartburn medicine for 9 straight years. 1 pill each morning, 24 hours, zero heartburn.
We were flattered when Regeneris